You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz, and this is a revisit of an interview from 2018 of celebrity chef Roy Yamaguchi. Roy is one of the founding members of the Hawaii regional cuisine movement. Revered for his culinary skills and known as the innovator of Hawaiian-inspired cuisine, an eclectic blend of California, French, Japanese cooking traditions created with fresh ingredients from the islands. He was honored with several awards, including the James Beard Best Pacific Northwest Chef Award in 1993 and several others. This is a really fun interview. Enjoy my conversation with Roy Yamaguchi. As you know, I just had a wonderful tasting. I had 4 dishes, and I'm going to put everything in the show notes with pictures and description. And of course, the most recent one that's on my mind is the last dish I had, the mahi-mahi, potato crusted, over risotto with truffles, mushrooms, lobster sauce. Am I giving a good description of it?
Yeah, very well, yes.
Oh, God. Delicious. Yeah, I'm so upset because, it was my 4th dish. So by the time I got to it, I couldn't finish the whole thing. But I got to tell you a story. So I guess we met really briefly. April of last year, I came to your grand opening. I had a wonderful meal, of course, and I get to the dessert table later,
Okay.
Course, yeah, you remember this.
Right. Yes.
And I'm standing there. I mean, the meal was already blew me away. And we're going to come back to this, but it also created this sense of community. We're going to come back to sharing this meal together, of course. And so at the dessert, I was like, I could barely stand. My knees were shaking. The food was so good. I get very affected by wonderful food and desserts. And across the table from me is this local musician, Marty Dredd. And both of us on our faces were just like melting right from, I wish I could remember. It was one of the chocolates like filled with something. And both of us, this is how we met, was because of the dessert. We were both just loving it, like melting. And we started to share our experience of the food and our experience of the dessert. And literally, that's how we started to bond. Again,
I like to hear that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I know that's part of what this is all about.
Yeah, you know what? It's to me, food is an international language. A lot of people can, by sharing, meals together, can really open up their hearts. And, one of the things that even the State Department does is they have a program where they like to have chefs come and to create meals for certain dignitaries where, they can make these meals where, it gives an opportunity for people to start talking and have dialogue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So to me, food has been very, very important in my life. And of course, I want to be able to share those moments with everybody else.
Do you remember, I know, you've done a lot of interviews, TV shows, all of that, and that'll be in the show notes too, but you've talked extensively about your parents and your grandparents, your grandfather, and I believe the Humble Market Kitchen where we are today at the Waialae Beach Resort in Maui is, I heard, maybe a tribute to your grandfather?
Yeah. So, my grandfather in the early 1900s left Japan. He's from an area called Fukushima, and he traveled and he ended up actually on Maui, and he started to work on the plantations and worked for a while on the plantations, and he and his wife, my grandmother, had 11 kids. They would all kind of take care of each other while my grandparents worked on the plantation.
Yeah. And
sooner or later, in the early 40s, with everything he did, my grandfather actually opened a restaurant. And then he ended up having about 2 or 3. We're not really sure exactly how many restaurants he had, but we believe that he had some sort of a tavern-type restaurant.
Yeah.
And, feeding the plantation workers.
Oh, here on the island, right?
Here on Maui. Yeah. And his restaurant was probably located somewhere from Wailuku to Kihei.
Okay.
We're not sure exactly which location. Everybody kind of forgets.
Yeah.
It's all the kids. So, and then he had some sort of a Simon or some sort of a noodle restaurant. And then in the 50s, getting out of the restaurant business, he actually went into the market business. So he had a general store.
Okay.
And he had a market called the Yamaguchi General Store. So to me, food has been a very important factor. And the Humble Market Kitchen was kind of like a tribute to my grandfather because of that.
Yeah. That's really nice. So, I heard the story about you at first signing up, I think in high school for a home economic class to meet girls, right?
Yeah, well, it's well, that's a good way. A good way to meet girls. Well, what happened was a good friend of mine. His name was Jesse, because I went to an American school in Japan. Basically, it's a Department of Defense, DoD school. Yeah. Inside of an Army base, U.S. Army base. So my father was stationed. They went to Japan. One day, a friend of mine comes up to me and says, "Hey, Roy, we should really take home ec." So I told him, I said, "What's home ec?" And he goes, "Don't worry about home ec. We're going to meet a lot of girls." Naturally, he met a lot of girls, but not me. I didn't. I just kind of like fell into cooking, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, but going into that, I mean, so if you were in high school, you're like in your teenage years. What about before that, given your family history? I mean, what was your personal attitude about food? Was it just there, or did you already have something special going on? You know
what? It was already there. So, I have to say that, my father, so my grandfather, when we used to visit my grandfather here on Maui, my grandfather used to always cook for us. And he would take us to, different farms and we would visit a bunch of stuff, people, etc. on island. But at home in Japan, my father did most of the cooking.
Oh, yeah. Is that a cultural thing, or is that just in your family?
It's just that I think it's because my father, used to help my grandfather in the kitchen when he was younger. Mm-hmm. So, he really enjoyed cooking. And as kids, my father would always take us to different ports in Japan. Yeah. And he would take us to different markets, and he was always looking for, fresh fish and, what's available. So earlier on in life, I was kind of like in that environment. Yeah. So of course, when I grew up, that's the kind of things that, got accustomed to. And, my father would always cook the meals at home. Yeah. So every night, it was basically kind of a ritual. During the weekday, my father would come home after work. My mother would have some sort of a kind of an appetizer, a poo-poo ready for my father. And, usually something called tsunomono, which is, something that's kind of like a little dish that's kind of vinegary. Yeah. No, usually it was kind of like sliced octopus with the cucumbers, marinated in rice wine vinegars, a little sugar, a little salt. So my father would pick on that, and he would read the paper and, have a glass of beer. Yeah. Relaxing, winding down. And then, he would, I guess at that time, he would think about what he was going to make for dinner. Okay. And then, after he's done with all of that, he would start, preparing dinner for us. And, then we had dinner. So my father was the one that cooked maybe, 5 times a week, whatever came to mind. And then when my mother would cook, she's from Okinawa. Okay. So she made, some of her favorite, Okinawan dishes. So, it was kind of, pretty cool, living at home and, seeing my parents cook, throwing the baton every now and then and, changing it up.
But I'm also thinking how you were just talking about how, your father would come home, I guess, from work, right? Obviously, he'd come back from work. He'd sit down, have the beer, have the octopus cooked that way. And I'm just thinking as a young boy, you're noticing that's part of his transition into relaxing. You know what I mean? So obviously you know what I mean, but it's but it's more than just.
No, I kept my eyes open in case I had some bad grades, and I would turn around and figure out when I should give him my report card.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. But yeah, so it's interesting because right from the beginning, it's more than just flavor, and it's more than taking the edge off the appetite. It's like this is his way of easing into the evening.
Yeah, you know what? It is because, and that's probably one of the early, hints I got about, what food really does to people, seeing them relax and kind of enjoying it, and, my mother would be happy and she would, feel good about making something for him, and then he would enjoy it. In turn, by him enjoying it, he would think about something to make for us. Yeah. So, it's kind of a good trickle-down effect, I guess.
Yeah. So I know that at 19, you went to the CIA, different CIA, the Culinary Institute of America. What were you thinking then? Because in high school, what were your passions? What were you doing during that time?
Well, it was kind of interesting because, I took home ec when I was about 16. Like, I guess a course, I mean, you have to take some courses, like home ec, I guess, was one of the electives that you can take. But there was like a wood shop or something, and there was like an electronic class.
The same as my high school. We must be close to the same age, exact same choices.
So I took wood shop, and I wasn't that good. And then I took electronics, and I almost blew up the classroom. So that was kind of like off limits. But I really enjoyed cooking.
Uh-huh.
So because, again, going back to see my father cook, and then, at the same time when my friends came over when I was younger, maybe say 12 or, maybe 13, maybe even younger, my friends would come over and, my dad had this, teriyaki sauce in the refrigerator.
Okay.
And, his teriyaki was really good.
Yeah.
So I would make, my friends like teriyaki chicken or, it's something that's very, very easy to make, and I would grill it.
Mm-hmm.
So, even back then, I saw myself, spending a lot of time, cooking for my friends.
Yeah. Huh.
When my parents would go out or something and they would be, gone, we always had like, some sort of like a sausage or, like a pepperoni in the refrigerator. And, I would always kind of pan fry that up and eat it with rice.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I was doing when I was, very young. So I think, a combination of all those things with home ec kind of drew me to, the food side.
But that's a big step to say, okay, I'm going to go to the Culinary Institute of America. Like, how did that come about in your mind? What was the?
Well, I think one of the things that really drew me to that during home ec class, we did a luncheon, and we were told to cook whatever we like to do.
Okay.
So, we had a choice of hamburger or turkey or whatever it was. And I actually made a roast turkey.
Okay.
So I made a roast turkey, made some stuffing. I can't remember what kind of stuffing I made, but, I'm guessing that it was a pretty much, one of those, Betty Crocker,
just
bread thing.
Yeah.
And then you throw water in it or something.
Yeah.
And,
well, still probably more complicated than most of the other boys in that class. I mean, come on.
So I made some stuffing, and I roasted a turkey, and I invited my school counselor.
Oh, brilliant.
As my guest.
Yeah.
And, I had to get on the good side of him, right? So I invited my school counselor, and he goes, "Hey, Roy, I think you got a knack for this."
Huh?
And he goes, "Your turkey's pretty good." And he goes, "Your stuffing's not bad too." So, I'm really not thinking anything of it. Maybe a week or two later, he called me into his office and he goes, "Hey, Roy, you know what? I really think that you should pursue this cooking thing."
Wow.
And he's the one who actually got all the information, later on about a school. Back then, I didn't know, anything about cooking schools, but, he looked it up and he goes, there's a great school called the Culinary Institute of America.
Yeah.
He goes, I think it just moved from New Haven, Connecticut to Hyde Park, New York. If you're really interested, I'll get you the information. And he got me all the information. And before, I knew it or anybody knew it, I was on track wanting to go to cooking school and put in the application, got accepted. There I went.
Isn't it interesting, synchronicity, serendipity, how it works? Like, what if you had not invited him? What if it wasn't him, right? It was another guidance counselor who thought of that?
Well, yeah. You know what? It's my life would be disastrous.
Well, I like to believe that we all kind of bring what we need and who we need to each other,
But it's you're absolutely right. I mean,
it's so fortuitous.
I mean, without this kid Jesse, a good friend of mine, without him saying, let's take home ec, without inviting the school counselor.
Yeah.
I mean, because I would have never, ever taken home ec because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So, I would have probably never taken home ec, which would have never brought me to the point where I would have, brought my school counselor.
Yeah.
And he's the one who did all the research. So it's, he's
incredible.
So what had happened was, I left New York right when I turned like 20. I left New York, because it was a two-year program at school. So I think I was like 19 and a half, 20 years old.
Okay.
That when I left New York and then went to Los Angeles.
Yes.
And then I ended up getting a job at the Beverly Hilton Hotel.
Wow.
And it was pretty interesting because went around looking for a job, and I found this job. It's over at the Beverly Hilton, and then I started working for this chef in this restaurant called the Escoffier Room, which was a very, very high class, French cooking, very, very traditional French style cooking and environment. So I got a job there, and I was so happy, and I was making green beans into string beans.
Okay, yeah.
I was putting this whole green bean into this machine and crank it with my hand, and it becomes a string bean.
Right.
So I was doing that, and I was making these potatoes called potato Anna, with layered with potatoes and truffles, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I was working there, and after about a week, the chef goes, "Roy, I got some bad news." I said, "What's the bad news?" He goes, "You can't work here anymore because I didn't hire you. You actually were hired to replace somebody else, but the person's coming back. But the good news is that if you want to still work in this hotel, you can go downstairs and work, cooking breakfast." So I said, "Well, I really had my heart set on, doing this type of food."
Yeah.
So, make long story short, I went to go look for another job, and I ended up working in a country club and, serving food on the buffet line. And, I was still looking around and finally got a job at this Scandinavian restaurant that, making great sandwiches and all that stuff. So doing all of that. And then I ended up working at this French restaurant, another French restaurant called the L'Ermitage. And back in the late 70s, when I started at L'Ermitage, they were considered the fourth best restaurant in the U.S.
My God.
The chef there was a chef owner of the restaurant, John Bertrand, was, his friends were like Paul Bocuse, who just recently passed away, and Roger Verger, and the Trois Gros brothers, and
wow,
so
big names.
Yeah, big names. Back in the 70s, and I ended up working at L'Ermitage.
Wow, and
it was a great experience, and working there for 2.5 years, meeting all these great chefs from all around the world. Mainly French chefs, and then from that point on, after about 2.5 years there. Back in the early 80s, I was able to get my first job as a chef, and that led to me working in another restaurant at the airport, LAX, over at the Sheraton LAX. There was a restaurant called Le Gourmet.
Okay,
and I ended up being the chef there, and that kind of opened the doors to opening my first restaurant, which was in 1984. I opened this restaurant called 385 North.
Okay.
And this restaurant was, it was my style of cooking, back then. Unfortunately, it didn't last too long. But that was my first real experience, and, having a partnership in a restaurant.
And the business side, right?
The
handling the business side.
And, creating foods that, that were dear to me.
Yeah.
It was my own style of cooking. So
when did you then start a restaurant that, let's quote unquote, became successful for you?
So the 385 North was my first restaurant, and I think far as food goes, I think we're very, very, very successful. It's just that business wise, we weren't, that good. Yeah. So my partners and I, and we just didn't do the right thing. But in 1988, which led we closed the restaurant in 87, which led me to move to Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So I moved to Hawaii in 1987.
And why? Why did you decide to do that?
The reason why I did that was because I had, my cousin who lived in Hawaii at that time had called me up and said, "Hey, Roy, you know what? You should really consider opening a restaurant in Hawaii because, there's this building that I drive by every morning, when I go to work, and I think it'll be a great place for you to have a restaurant."
Uh-huh.
So that's why, in the early 1987, I came to Hawaii, and then, kind of scoped it out, and I thought the location was kind of magical. Sometimes to me, restaurants, you have a feel,
the environment, right?
Yeah, you walk in somewhere into a building or whatever it may be, or you stand on a street corner, and sometimes you get this feeling that, hey, this might be a great place to have a restaurant.
Yeah.
So I came to Hawaii and you know, specifically to Hawaii Kai, where we opened our first restaurant, the first Roy's.
Mm-hmm.
As I stood there, I go, wow, you know, this feels pretty good. Went into the building and kind of spent time there. You know, I just had a good feeling about that space. And so I ended up opening the first Roy's in that space. And, you know, everybody that I talked to in Hawaii, just about every person I talked to, when it came to, you know, an architect or a contractor or anybody that knew anything about restaurants, told me not to open there.
Really?
They said, do not open there because you'll fail.
Whoa.
You'll fail because the neighborhood that I picked to put the first Roy's in was in a residential area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a residential area where people didn't really go to.
Okay.
I mean, they would live there.
I got you, but yeah.
But when they would eat and go out and eat, they would actually drive out of that neighborhood and go somewhere else. But I wanted to be in that neighborhood because I felt that I wanted to really build a community-based restaurant.
Yes. Tying in what we were talking about earlier about the experience of eating and sharing.
I wanted to be in a neighborhood where I felt that, you know, I can be a part of that community.
Yeah.
And if I succeeded, the community would be proud of what I was doing. And I wanted to hire individuals from that community. You know, so I wanted everything tied back to community, to give to the community, to be a part of the community, to be a good, you know, citizen of that community. So, you know, the Hawaii Kai area was a very, very like a bedroom community, but that's where I wanted to be.
Well, so Roy, you know, I'm curious, like you were talking about how everyone's telling you it's going to fail. And I read somewhere in some interview, you said, I've always had a lot of determination. So I get that. But with that comes, I don't know if it's a sense of fearlessness. I mean, I like to talk about, you know, leaping off the cliff and assuming that net is going to appear. Like, what is it for you that you were able to, and still at a relatively young age, and you had already had that one business that didn't really work out business-wise. What do you think it is about you that was able to say, I'm going to do this, and to come out with this idea of community?
Well, I
just
think,
a total gut thing?
Well, no, I think, well, a couple of things. I think, you know, again, going back to my childhood, I was born and raised on an army base in Japan.
Okay.
So it's a small base, and where we lived was on base. So again, it's a tight community.
I see. Yeah.
Everything was, you know, even though Japan is, you know, I mean, it's an island and is, you know, relatively, you know, there's a lot of people living there. When you live on base, it's just a small community.
Well, it's like a subculture, isn't it?
It's like a subculture, and what you have there is, you have a high school and you have a middle school, and you know, you kind of grow up with to a certain extent, you grow up with the same people, but yet, of course, the military is always changing, right? They're coming in and out, but yet the school is always there. So, you know, so it was kind of like, to me, a very, very tight knit community, and you know what you do, you know, everybody knows kind of a deal. So when I opened that restaurant in Hawaii Kai, you know, the first Roy's, I wanted that same kind of feeling. And I think that feeling stuck to me. And with the failure of the restaurant 385 North, you know, that I had opened previously, you know, it kind of opened my eyes to what I didn't do or what I should have done.
Yeah. So
again, that was very, very important. And at that time, it's important to say that there was a TV show on during that time, and it was Cheers.
Okay.
And I used to watch Cheers, and I used to always go, wow, that's pretty cool, because, you know, you always had, I think his name was Norm, you know, on the show, but he had two individuals that always sat there and drank beer.
That's right.
Among everybody else.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was a place where everybody got together, right? The bartender knew, you know, his customers or her customers. And, you know, I mean, it was kind of an environment where everybody was happy, and, you know, they tell stories.
This is so interesting. Yeah.
So I saw that, and that always stuck to my mind. And when I opened 385 North, you know, I knew that I was missing that.
Okay.
And I lacked that. So I wanted to make sure that whatever I did after 385 North, if I was able to do something again, you know, I said to myself, you know, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. And, you know, what I want is a restaurant where it's a neighborhood. And everybody knows their, you know, knows their names, and, you know, they feel comfortable. and it was a place where they would gather.
Yeah, it's like a home away from home kind of, right?
Yeah,
Kind of like Cheers. So how then, I mean, going from there, obviously it was successful. For you to then scale your business and start opening businesses eventually all over the world. And in a minute, a little bit, we'll get to TV shows and books and all of that. But as far as the restaurants, how were you able to take that community sense and expand it outward?
Well, so, what's important is that when I first opened the first Roy's, I wanted people to work really close with me. And of course, I wanted talent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I chose the kind of people that I really wanted to work with.
Like a mentor kind of a relationship?
No, not really a mentor type relationship, but it was more of a, if there was something that I lacked, I wanted someone that was good at that.
I see.
So, when we first opened the first Roy's, I wanted somebody that was good in wines.
Okay.
I wanted somebody that was good in service. I wanted somebody that was good in business communications. I wanted somebody that was just as good as me when it came to cooking. So these are the individuals that I hired and said, "Hey, come work with me. We're going to try to work and build something, good." And that's what I did.
And although you're the owner, in a sense, together, it's your team. And having them feel invested in it too, I imagine.
Exactly. So I wanted to create a team that, we can kind of like throw our ideas on. I'm telling you, in the very beginning, we used to sit around after work and, kind of like critique the night.
Okay.
And, and have a little cocktail and, something, a little bite to eat. And before you know it, it's a shouting match.
I like that. Listen. You got to have passion, right? The passion extends everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want that too. In my team, I have 3 teams because I have 2 podcasts and a music business, but it's the same thing. I encourage them. It's like, speak up. I want to hear what you have to say. And I want you to have a voice and eventually compensate them in a way that also reflects that. I want to have a team that
right.
helps take me. There was a time when I was not like a dictator, but I was weight controlling. And it was ironically, about this too, right? When you let go of control, now you can really grow.
Right. And it's, so exactly. And that's so the second restaurant, getting back to that second restaurant, how did it work out, et cetera, was because I had these individuals on my team, from the very, very beginning. So, 3 years out is when we opened our second restaurant. I had a pretty good, pretty tight knit team that kind of knew each other. And, we would work with each other. And then we had some, other individuals, below us, that wanted to reach that same height.
Yeah.
And, so, we kind of divided the team.
Okay.
And sent half the team to, our second location to open the second location. I
see.
And so to me, what's really important is the culture, the culture you create. And I truly believe that we had a very strong culture, not knowing that we did. I believe that we had a strong culture that kind of, really bonded together. And with that second location, the team members that went to the second location strived to make sure that culture was alive.
And create a similar...
And create that same environment.
Yeah.
The same feeling that worked for us at the first location.
Are you able to put words to that, to how you would describe your culture?
You know what? It's kind of interesting because, later on, I would say about, if I had to guess, somewhere like 15 years after we opened the first Roy's, we actually were going to start opening locations, on the mainland U.S., the continent of the U.S. So we started to open restaurants, and we actually got involved and hired a company that really deals with, keeping cultures together.
Okay.
And branding.
I was going to say defining the brand, right? And so putting words to it so you can recreate it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it was all about, trying to move our culinary culture was extremely important because,
Mhm.
you know what, it's a chef-driven concept.
Yeah.
The chefs are very, very important as anybody else, but the chefs were kind of like, really guiding the ship because they were the ones that were creating menus
Yeah.
and, it was their identity, that was reflected on the plate. So, we try to carve out some words, but at the end of the day, there really isn't a just one sentence that you can say. It was more about we had an 8-page document.
Like a mission statement kind of, or a brand statement.
Well, it's a principle statement.
Okay.
And it's all about what we do, what we try to achieve, and who's important. Who the stakeholders are, and it's we call it the principles and beliefs of Roy's, and it's called Roy's Way. So
yeah, you said something a moment ago about people reflecting kind of who they are in the cooking, and you said, quote, "I love showing my personality in my cooking." Can you talk for a moment about that?
Yeah. So what was interesting was and it's from the very start. I think when I started to cook, I really enjoyed cooking, and I started to infuse French cooking.
Yeah.
Because I really liked, and in the very beginning, I didn't really know why I liked French cooking. It's just that I just thought French cooking was the way to go.
Okay.
But when I started to work in a French restaurant, I really enjoyed making sauces.
I was going to say that seems to be the centerpiece of French.
So yeah, so I started to make sauces, and I really enjoyed making sauces. And so I worked with a chef owner, John Bertrand, and then I worked with his chef de cuisine, Michel Blanchet. And, I was making sauces, and, he taught me how to make sauces, and I was able to be like his commis, the assistant.
Yeah.
And then, as a, first cook, and then later on I became, sous chef, the assistant. So I love making sauces, and, those things that I really enjoy doing. And I said to myself, geez, I should really come up with my own style of cooking.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to infuse, Asian flavors into French sauces and, all the traditional classical dishes that we might have made in the restaurant. I would try to duplicate that and add my own flair to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made me, want to create my own food. And then, so I said to myself, that's what should be really displayed on a plate.
I see.
The first time I really thought about that, to a point was when Paul Schaefer came to our restaurant, and I made him dinner.
Yeah.
And then after he had dinner, I went up. I said, Mr. Schaefer, did you enjoy your meal tonight? He goes, you know what? I think I saw your personality on the plate.
Whoa.
I couldn't really say it in words, but, at the same, after I heard that, kind of put 2 to 2 together.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, that's what I've been trying to do all my life when it came to cooking.
Yeah.
Is to really put my personality in what I do and have it be reflected on the plate.
That was really astute of him to, word it in that way. And you're credited with being the creator of Hawaiian fusion cuisine. Do you feel limited by that phrase, that definition? Because I feel you're more than that.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's one of your successes, commercial successes, but it's just a piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, hey, listen, at the end of the day, I think, my cooking is far beyond, being.
You don't want to be labeled, just like a musician doesn't want to be labeled.
Yeah. So, I'm more of an international. I mean, basically, I whatever that term may be, but of course, my style of cooking now is more about the inspiration. It's the inspiration, being inspired by Hawaii, but definitely it's internationally influenced.
I get it. Yeah,
it's what I do. So for me, instead of saying that it's Hawaiian fusion, I think I like to say that it's Hawaii inspired but internationally influenced.
Oh, I like that
type of cuisine.
I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to thewedingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's thewedingbiznetwork.com. You also said somewhere, I'm a believer that people are born with a sense of cooking. It's something within them that really gives them the ability to create and to understand flavors. Can you say more about that?
Well, I think that, you have, to me, to be creative, you have to be inspired and to, have, a love for food and to, because, to me, it's everybody and anybody, I think, at some point in their life tries to cook and, some people aren't good at it and then they say, maybe I'm not good at it and they stop. But at the end of the day, when you really think about it, pretty much everybody on this earth enjoys their parents' cooking.
That's interesting.
And it's not because that it's good, but it's because it's done with love.
Yes.
And care.
Yeah.
And, it's
nurturing.
It's nurturing. So I think that food becomes to some extent, a very big part in people's lives. And especially, for cultures that really, like maybe the Italian culture or the French culture, where food is a very, it's something that you do together, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I get it. So you talked about needing to be inspired. How do you go about, is there a particular process when you create new dishes, and how that inspiration happens, and then how do you manifest it into?
Well, there's really no one way that I do things, but definitely when I see different things in life, whether it be color or whether it be, circumstances, so I don't really design a dish or come up with a dish in the kitchen. My inspiration just comes from whatever I do in life. And I can be thinking, I can be just driving and all of a sudden come up with a dish because, I think like a lot of chefs, we have food banks.
Yeah.
So, whether it be vision or whether it be smell or whether, there's something else to it, we have an idea about food and what we like and how we can put all of this together. So we don't have to be behind a stove.
Sure.
So we create dishes as we, drive or, sitting on an airplane being bored or something.
Yeah, right.
So for me, I guess the inspiration comes when I see something and I go, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Then I get motivated. And then all of a sudden, I'm creating a dish because of that excitement that that I just went through.
Do you literally stop and take notes, or you just retain this and eventually you get to the kitchen?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't have to take notes, but today I forget things.
Yeah.
I have to take notes.
I relate. Yeah. So is there any dish that, okay, let's say that you come up with this idea and, you manifest it, but are there moments where you can't get to it?
What sometimes happens is that, I'll think of a great dish in my mind and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And, and I'll try it. It just doesn't work. and I'll just throw it on the shelf, and then later on I'll get back to it.
Yeah.
But there's incidents when something like that happens. Yeah.
I used to write songs, and this was for years and years and years, and I would take notes, and I wouldn't, and, I would work on stuff, and sometimes things would come very quickly. Other times it would be, 8 years later, I'm working on one idea, and all of a sudden, bam, it connects, right, with an idea earlier that didn't quite work. I mean, I'm assuming it's all kinds of things, but that's part of it too.
Yeah, exactly. You just let it. Sometimes you just
got to let it marinate.
Yeah, exactly. You got to let it marinate. Just let it just go, and then think about it and come back later on.
So I want to ask you too, what do you feel differentiates a great chef from a master?
Well, it's kind of interesting because to me, whether you're great or whether you're a master or whether you're just a cook, to a certain extent, what's important to me is your heart. And I really feel that if I can just answer it in this way, somebody that's a great cook can relate to a lot of people. Okay. Sometimes you're a chef or a master chef, meaning that, a lot of times in the terms of, someone being a master chef, it's more technical.
More than just the okay.
It's technical. Yeah. And
the art. Right?
And the art itself. But, a lot of it is, you can be a chef and a master chef. I mean, people can say, okay, you're a master chef or a chef. But to me, a master chef is more about someone that's more technical, that knows really the technical stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But at the same time, you have to understand that to me, a great cook can reach more people through his cooking. Because sometimes what happens is, chefs want to make food that pleases them.
Okay.
But does that really please the public? But when you have a great cook that can make people happy because he's just cooking something that's really good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be creative.
But it moves you.
Okay. And I think that, those are the people that I really want to call masters, because they're the ones who really create a joyful environment, joyful, evening. And sometimes, chefs get too crazy.
So what do you tell aspiring chefs? I mean, that's a big question, but it seems related to this. I'm almost thinking one of the answers is to consider what you're talking about, right? It's not just the ingredients and what you're mixing and all of this. It's really considering who.
You know what? When I make my menus, I look at where I am and the type of guests I think that are going to walk through the doors.
Yeah.
So location is extremely important, where you live. And I try to make food that, number one, I love to eat. Okay. No, don't get me wrong. It's all my style, but I want to make sure that I can make the locals happy.
Yeah.
And to me, that's extremely important. So again, getting back to the neighborhood, we have a lot of restaurants that are in resort areas, but we do have restaurants that are in neighborhoods, communities where, we want to make sure that, we cook for the community. And of course, important to buy, your local ingredients from that community. So,
and support them and all of that too. Yeah. And reflected in the cooking. I understand. So I'm imagining when you travel, do you also just take time and go travel? Like, what is your life like when it comes to that? I know you're so busy. There's so much going on, but do you just take time to get away and experience a culture and taste and eat and talk?
Well, you know what? When I do travel, and it's I've been fortunate enough in my life to where I've been to maybe close to 50 countries by now, but I make it a point to really dig in and learn more about the culture than anything else. Sightseeing, of course, is it's great, but I try to mingle and go into neighborhoods and and get into a local market. Yeah, not a grand market.
Yeah, right. But, a real down home.
Yeah. And go into some funky neighborhood. Yeah. And go into a grocery store and see what they have. And those are the type of environments I like. And sometimes when I visit friends or or visit, restaurants, or get asked to go to, visit restaurants in different cities or different countries. I like to try and get a cook that works in a restaurant to take me to his house or her house.
Ooh, I like that.
And have a meal that they may have.
Yeah.
So, that's because to me, that's, learning more about the culture.
What time should I put down to come at your house? And I bet that was a moment I'm taking advantage of. So switching for a moment to, let's call it the commercial side of the business. I mean, branding is important. This is the world of social media and all of that. And you hosted, I believe, 6 seasons of the television show Hawaii Cooks with Roy Yamaguchi, which is, I think, been seen in more than 60 countries. You've got 3 cookbooks, and we're going to put this all in the show notes. How about managing that side of your, I hate to keep calling it brand, but it's important, right? It's today's world.
Yeah, it's important. What's kind of unfortunate that I think that, when we first opened restaurants, or even when I worked at L'Hermitage, going back to, 40 years ago or something, you cooked great food and you provided great service and your restaurant was full. I mean, people went to restaurants that were great.
Yeah.
Or seeked out restaurants that were great. Today, for what it's worth, there's a lot of hype to, a lot of restaurants. And, if a restaurant doesn't have a certain hype, maybe that restaurant is not seen as a place to go to. I mean, I know a lot of great restaurants where they have great food, but, they're not as busy as some of the restaurants that are not so good, but yet they have a lot of hype.
Yeah.
So, because now design is part of it. Someone who builds a restaurant with these, bells and whistles compared to somebody that builds a pretty plain restaurant. Sometimes,
I love those too.
So, there's all these different angles and different types of things that adds up to, what it ends up to be. But, social media now, it plays a big part. And, that's how people, can hype their establishment or the establishment gets that hype and becomes extremely popular through those, social media channels.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot going on now where there wasn't before, whether it's good or bad. I don't know. I mean, that's for the people that are extremely busy, it's good. And for the people that are not, I mean, maybe,
you have to embrace it, don't you?
You have to, and that's just the way life is today. And there's a lot of good to it, I guess. I mean, you can reach to a lot of people, or have you can go out and reach a lot of people without really doing too much.
Yeah, to
a certain extent.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it was about getting a magazine ad, or being on a magazine, or be more talked about in a magazine, or maybe a news broadcast or something on TV.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but I also want to ask you, you were making me think, so there's a trend, I call it a trend now, but I love it, for kind of health and wellness, and how is that affecting the industry and your own work? I imagine it's a good thing for you, the way you cook, right?
Well, I think it's a good thing because, I mean, there's a lot more issues now than probably ever before, or it's just that it's, people are more open to it. But, there's a lot of opportunities now for, individuals that have allergies or some issues, with a certain type of food. But at the end of the day, it's good for the customers, and it's also good for the restaurants because, now we can provide something special to our guests.
Yeah.
Meaning that, for instance, if someone comes with an allergy, of course, we do our best to make sure that we look at all the different allergies that a person might have. So someone says, I got a peanut allergy. Okay, fine. What can we do to, make sure that there's no peanuts, right? Peanut oil, using a certain pan to cook it in. But more importantly, if someone has, maybe they're vegan or, vegetarian or gluten-free, all of that stuff, we do have menus that may deal with that. But at the same time, what we like to do is to create individual menus.
Wow.
To ask a guest, what are you allergic to? What can you eat? What can't you eat? And let me make a menu for you for tonight.
Yeah, wow.
Let me make a dish for you, or if you want 2 dishes, let me make 2 dishes. If you want 3, we'll make 3.
That's wonderful.
But, to personalize it so that they feel that they're getting something special rather than a pre-made menu that someone's going to say, oh, if a vegan comes in, we're going to give them this. Or if somebody that's this, we're going to give them that. It's kind of nice to kind of give them that personal treatment and say, hey, listen, let us do something for you tonight.
Yeah, I get that.
We have a menu here, but that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, love that.
Tell me what you want and what you feel comfortable, or what's going to make you happy tonight. And
there we go.
Let's make a menu that's going to make you happy.
Yeah. So as we get ready to wrap up, you've built quite an empire. How are you balancing personal life and business life? Even though I know they overlap too, but how are you managing this? I mean, my God, Roy, you're very busy. You got a lot happening.
Yeah, a lot happening. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's. I enjoy what I do. I've been very, very fortunate to find something in life that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So working a lot is not a problem. Of course, you end up having a family and you have, you got to take care of that need. But, I try to balance the time out where, I can spend and, do this and do that with the kids, or, to older kids and younger kids. And, you try to do what you can. And, I try to focus in. So I'll be honest with you. When I get home, and if I'm home, I make sure that I don't answer emails. Or I don't
turn it all off when you're there. Focus, right?
That I don't use the phone.
Yeah.
And it's to me, it's important that I be that way.
I imagine you're cooking at your own home, or
oh yeah, I always make it a point where for the kids, what do you want to eat? And I make that, and it's I enjoy doing it. It's.
Yeah. I would enjoy being your kid in the house eating. So kind of last question. You're still relatively young. Do you have any more, let's call it aspirations or dreams, or what are you thinking about for the future? Are you thinking of the future?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. When I was younger, I was always trying to get somewhere. And today I'm more about making sure that what I have, I want to make sure that I continue to refine it to make it better. So I work hard at trying to make something better each day. And for me, I can't wait to get up in the morning and go to work.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning and I just can't wait to just try and make a difference in the things that I have in life. And that's the restaurants, taking care of the kids, doing something better for the community. But it's about. But first of all, it's about it's who that are around me. Of course, on a day-to-day basis. Of course, it's family, and of course, it's the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, with doing that, of course, it trickles down to making a better experience for our guests.
Yeah.
But aside from that, cooking it definitely has been my life, and things that relate to cooking is what I always look to do more of.
Yeah.
So, and I've been fortunate that our brand has a pretty strong name and value to it, and we're always asked to do something, whether it be a guest chef, or whether it be to open another restaurant, or whether to do an event, or things like that. So I'm very blessed, and I'm very happy that I'm given the opportunity to stay relevant. And I think that's the word. I think to me, being relevant is more important than making money. I think to be relevant, for instance, I had a call today and someone said, by the way, I want to ask you something about, miso.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something about some Japanese food.
Okay.
Because they told me that I should be asking you for this.
Got it.
So to me, being relevant to what I do in this business and making a difference with that, whether it be in your industry or your community, I think, to me, it's pretty exciting.
Well, Roy, well, thank you so much for sharing with me. And also in my 2 trips to Maui here, the meals that I've had here, I have been an experience, and sitting with you is an experience. So thank you. This has been a blast.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this re-release of an earlier episode on the wedding biz. If you enjoyed it, please share it with 3 friends or colleagues who you think would also benefit from hearing it. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Wedding Biz. And you can follow me on Clubhouse at Andy Kushner. And be sure to join the Wedding Biz Club on Clubhouse. We'll catch you next time on The Wedding Biz.